So for those that have been keeping up with recent releases on the channel, you'll know that one of my current quote-unquote long-form projects is my pitch for my own take on Doctor Who as the showrunner. Now, so far we've gone to 2049 and fought the Master, and more recently we've gone to Earth in more of a post-apocalyptic, war-torn future at the end of the Cyber Wars to face the Cybermen. And in this video we're tackling Season 3, where the Doctor heads to the 1980s, meets a new companion, and battles the Daleks in a fight to protect the lost city of Atlantis. So where do we leave off with the Doctor last? Well, Season 2 took our Doctor, Andrew Lincoln, and Charlie into the far future, where humanity is at war with the remnants of the Cybermen. Several adventures ensue, including the Doctor embracing his war persona once again, making friends with a vicar named Ezekiel, the Doctor and Charlie encountering zombified Cybermen on an abandoned ship, fighting the Cyber Commanders from the Dark Dimension and the Cyber Controller, the sacrifice of Ezekiel, and the departure of Charlie from the TARDIS. The Doctor then wonders how far he's willing to go to save the universe, and truly begins to wonder if one day he will become the Valeyard. So, with Charlie gone, the Cybermen destroyed, and the Doctor in a fairly neutral place, what's next for the story going forward? Well, for Season 3 we're taking things to a more fantastical level, even though Russell's already done that, and this season we'll see the Doctor facing off against his one true nemesis, the Daleks. More specifically, the Doctor finds himself in a race to the lost city of Atlantis against the Daleks to stop them from acquiring technology from the lost city to rebuild the Dalek Empire. So I'm going to start off first with the Doctor, as he goes through quite a monumental change over the course of Season 3. Now, at the end of Season 2, Charlie leaves the Doctor due to him willing to let both her and Ezekiel die to the Cybermen in order to stop the war, and she doesn't want to travel with the Doctor if this is what a large-scale conflict will do to him. Charlie's departure inspires the Doctor to be a better person, and it does work when he meets his new companion, which I'll come back to in just a moment. Now, the Doctor finds himself locked in a battle with our villains for Season 3 as he is put in a race against them to find Atlantis. Another point I'm bringing up about the Doctor is that this will be the last season to feature Andrew Lincoln as the character, as his final battle with the villains in this season will lead to his regeneration into a new incarnation. Okay, so that then brings us to our new companion for Season 3, what with Charlie departing the TARDIS, leaving the Doctor alone with Chameleon, who was built in a way so that he's confined to the control room, similar to the Shouker Master, which I mentioned in my Season 1 video. Okay, so that brings us to introducing our new companion, Daisy Warren. So, Daisy is the Doctor's companion from here on out, travelling with him throughout Seasons 3 to 5. Now, Daisy specifically is from the past, more specifically she's from the 1980s. One thing I actually mentioned in a previous entry in the series is that I was frustrated with companions mostly being from modern day Earth, at least when it came to the modern run on Who from 2005 onwards, and I wanted to do something different with my companions specifically, that being they're not from contemporary time periods, so that being they're not from the present day, and Daisy is another example of what I was going for. An aspiring deaf writer, Daisy encounters the Doctor by chance when she's working on her new fantasy novel, The Call of Atlantis, about an archaeologist who seeks to find the sunken city. Now, when I was conceptualizing the character of Daisy, I wanted more of a contrast to the character of Charlie, who was a tough streetwise companion from the future, and I kept that in mind when casting the character, because my choice for Daisy is Rose Ayling-Ellis. Now, Rose in the past 5 years has become a household name, having played Frankie Lewis in EastEnders for around 3 years, and then going on to start in the new ITV drama Code of Silence, and whilst I am yet to watch the latter, it was actually Rose's work on EastEnders that made me want to cast her as a companion, as I've been a follower of that soap for quite a few years. Now, I am aware that Rose was in a recent episode of Who, however, this is a different time period as opposed to the far future when we saw her character, So I would say this casting can still fit into the timeline. In fact, if we were to actually fit this into the narrative canon, I think the Doctor could actually take some comfort in seeing a face that he recognises, even though the face doesn't recognise him, because it's someone completely different to him. Okay, that then brings us to our villains for Season 3, the Daleks, and more specifically what I'll be doing with them for this season. Now, originally, I did consider filling a gap in the timeline and have the Daleks in this series be a group of renegades that survived the events of Remembrance. However, I instead decided to head a bit later in the timeline and have this be a group of Daleks from after Series 9 of Modern Who, that survived the collapse of the main Skaro city and fled in a decommissioned Dalek saucer, sort of a parallel to how the first Doctor and Susan fled in a decommissioned TARDIS way at the start of the entire Who timeline. Now, the group of Daleks in the story plan to find Atlantis, believing it to contain enhanced technology that they can use to repair Skaro and restore the Dalek Empire. Now, another element of the classic run I'm bringing back is the use of different weapon attachments in place of the plunger arm. Over the years, we've seen the Daleks using some kind of tool in place of the usual plunger attachment, whether it be a claw arm as seen in Parting of the Ways, a flamethrower as seen in the Daleks' Master Plan, or the mutant scoop from Power of the Daleks. Now, in Season 3, one of the Daleks is fitted with a seismic detector, which doesn't really serve the same purpose that it did in the classic run. In the classic Who episode The Chase, the Daleks use a seismic detector to track the TARDIS. However, this updated version instead tracks the seismic activity of earthquakes, which becomes of use to them in the story, as you'll find out. Okay, as a quick side note before I move on to all the story related details, I just wanted to add that I'm not using the Time War design from Modern Who in regards to the Daleks. Instead, I'm actually using a more updated version of the Renegade design from Classic Who. There's going to be a photo on screen now to show what the design for the Daleks is going to be in Season 3. Okay, so this then brings us to the story for Season 3 and how this encounter with the Daleks in a race for Atlantis is going to play out. Okay, so Episode 1 is going to serve as the introduction to our new companion Daisy as she researches some books for her fantasy novel about an archaeologist seeking to find Atlantis. After translating some Atlantean language and reading it aloud, it triggers an earthquake, and we then cut to the Doctor and follow his point of view for a moment. Regarding how long it's been for the Doctor since Season 2, it has been a couple of months since those events and when Charlie left the TARDIS, at least from his perspective. Now, the Doctor has been travelling on his own since Charlie left him with only Chameleon for company, who acts mainly as a pilot for the TARDIS and cannot accompany the Doctor outside of it. Eventually, the Doctor detects some seismic activity in 1980s Cardiff, which attracts his attention, and he makes his way to the time period. Now, a bulk of the series does take place in Cardiff, and when the Doctor lands in the 80s version of the Welsh town, he does make an effort to try and avoid the Torchwood hub, as he knows that a previous version of Captain Jack is stationed there before his reunion with the 10th Doctor in Utopia, and doesn't really want to cause any damage to the timeline and what have you. The earthquake brings the Doctor and Daisy into each other's past, and the two realise they have a common goal. Daisy then tells the Doctor about herself, that she's an aspiring writer and wants to write a new fantasy book about Atlantis. As a quick note here, because I think this is kind of obvious to sort of address, Rose Ailing-Ellis, who I've cast as Daisy, is deaf in real life, and I carried that over with Daisy, so I think the Doctor would possibly learn some form of sign language to communicate with her. And I'd like to think that perhaps later on in the story, the Doctor will actually give Daisy a pair of advanced hearing aids that he's created so that they can understand each other properly. So the Doctor admires what Daisy is doing, but after reading the transcripts that she took from the library to use for research, the Doctor realises that when Daisy read the Atlantean language when it was translated into English, that was what triggered the seismic shift underground, and the cliffhanger for Episode 1 would be the arrival of the Daleks and their interest in finding Atlantis. Episode 2 would be where the Doctor confronts the Daleks, and here we discover that these versions of the titular villains are survivors from the events of Series 9 and reveal that they plan to steal the technology they believe is still hidden in the Lost City to repair Skaro. The Doctor and Daisy escape the Daleks and return to the TARDIS, now determined to find the Lost City as well and prevent the Atlantean technology from falling into the wrong hands. Episode 3 will then pick up a few days later. The Doctor and Daisy has spent their time tracking the Dalek ship, which has remained in the vortex for those few days. I want to make clear, because in extension to my point earlier, this would be in the period where the Doctor gives Daisy the advanced hearing aids that I just mentioned. The duo catches a break and sees the Daleks land on Earth approximately a decade later in the 90s. Returning to the earthquake spot in Cardiff, the Doctor confirms his suspicion that the translated Atlantean passage spoken by Daisy was a method of trying to bring the kingdom back to the surface. I'd also make the retcon of the Doctor having visited Atlantis in its prime, previously in his 8th incarnation when he was travelling with Lucy Miller. So if this story was made as a series, then Paul McGann and Sheridan Smith would appear through a short flashback. The Daleks arrive, killing a few civilians, which causes the Doctor and Daisy to retreat. However, this was a ruse, as the Doctor has figured out a way to properly track the position of Atlantis beneath the Earth's crust. After some tinkering, the Doctor manages to construct a ground sonar device that he can wire to the TARDIS and use to locate wherever Atlantis is hidden beneath the Earth. Back on their ship, the Daleks are also using their seismic detection controls, managed to locate the source of the Lost Kingdom as well. Episode 4 would be where both parties discover Atlantis. The Doctor and Daisy look around, and after translating another passage of Atlantean language, Daisy speaks it aloud, which in turn causes another small earthquake, leading the Daleks to the Lost Kingdom as well. This would then bring us onto the penultimate episode as we get more backstory on Atlantis and how the kingdom came to be. It was founded by a pantheon of Atlantean gods, these being Oceanus, Prometheus, Leto, Hyperion, Thea, and Atlas. Eventually these gods fell and Atlan became the true ruler, bringing the kingdom to a new age of prosperity. After exploring Atlantis a little further, the Doctor and Daisy come across a vast chasm, and after looking at the nature of this chasm itself, the Doctor realises that this is what truly caused the collapse of Atlantis. The shifting of the Earth is what caused Atlantis to fall, and the shifting land in turn resulted in an earthquake which caused the total collapse of the kingdom, sending it beneath Earth. The only detail the Doctor is unable to reconcile at this point is what happened to Atlan, because with the collapse of the kingdom having been determined, the fate of the Atlantean ruler remains the only missing piece of this puzzle. That then brings us onto the finale, where the Doctor discovers that the fate of Atlan and the collapse of Atlantis are linked. Atlan was the one to overthrow the pantheon of gods and take the throne for himself. Several thousand years later, Atlan's rule came to an end when the Pantheon, now filled with vengeance, returned from heaven and punished Atlan himself by killing him, and as punishment, sent Atlantis to the underground, the seismic shift killing the remaining occupants of the lost city. The Daleks would arrive believing that Atlan was the key to discovering the source of Atlantis' power, and in doing so also exterminate the Doctor. Opening Atlan's tomb, however, triggers a massive earthquake which causes the kingdom to begin crumbling. The Doctor and Daisy would escape to the TARDIS whilst the Daleks are destroyed and buried beneath the Lost Kingdom's rubble, now lost to time forever. Back in the TARDIS, Chameleon is piloting the controls as the Doctor recuperates, and Daisy is sat by him, hoping that he's okay. The Doctor gets to his feet, saying it was never supposed to end like this, and Daisy's confused, but Chameleon steps in. The Doctor looks to Daisy and smiles. He regenerates into his next incarnation.